Coming up, a big ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, return of the hostages. I'll talk about all that. Also, the fate of Pam Bondi and also Marco Rubio, next up after Pete Hegseth. And Pastor Jack Hibbs, he's from Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, California. He's going to join me. We're going to talk about the implications of living in a one-party state. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to the channel or hit the follow button, if you will. I'd also appreciate it if you'd share the podcast so more people can find out about it. Hey, this is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I've been watching with interest and sometimes with amusement the Senate confirmation hearings of Pam Bondi and Marco Rubio, and of course there are also one or two things I want to mention about Pete Hegseth. With regard to Pam Bondi, I thought that she came across as very self-assured. I love the fact that at one point she zapped Adam Schiff by saying, "Hey, isn't this the kind of misrepresentation that got you censured by Congress?" That took a little boldness or pluck to be able to say that, and it was very effective. And the common theme we're seeing here from Hegseth and Rubio and Bondi is they're not backing down. Bondi will say things like, at one point, one of the senators goes, "Well, you have to say this and you have to say that." And she goes, "I don't have to say anything. I'll answer your questions, but I'm not obliged to say something because you tell me to say it." So this is a little more boisterous, pushbacky. I'm not going to take it. It's a Trumpian spirit that we're seeing in the Trump nominees, and it's actually good. It's actually good to watch. Sometimes these conversations are downright playful. I want to talk about a conversation between Senator Sheehy and Hegseth. Here we go. Sheehy: "How many genders are there?" Hegseth: 2. Sheehy: "I know that. Well, I'm a she-he." His name is she-he, so he knows there are 2 genders. So he goes, I'm on board. But then the part of it that I think is key to this whole thing. Here we go. What is the diameter of a rifle fired out of an M4A1? Hegseth: 5.56. Sheehy: "How many push-ups can you do?" Hegseth: "I did 5 sets of 47 push-ups this morning." Sheehy: "Most important strategic base is in the Pacific." Hegseth: "Guam." Sheehy: "How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?" Hegseth: "Standard issue is 30. Sheehy: "What size round is the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military?" Hegseth: 9mm. Sheehy: "What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?" Hegseth: "Duracell." Now, this is the payoff right here. A lot of these generals are bureaucrats. They have come up through the system. They are Class A schmoozers. They know how to play the game. They live in the interstices of the military and politics. They sidle up to the politicians. They have a pretty good way with the donors. These are not war fighters. They're talkers, they're cajolers, they are coalition builders. They play the DC game. This is not Hegseth. Hegseth is a guy with tattoos and and military gear. And he knows what he's doing, and he's been on the battlefield. And I think Trump's point here is, I want that kind of a guy to come in because the problem with the military is that it is concerned itself with 7 things other than the one thing it's supposed to do, which is to develop maximum lethality. So the military is concerned with, well, why don't we try putting the cadets in high heels? And not because they fight better that way, obviously, but it's because we want them to know what the experience is like of being a woman. Why? Why is that an important experience for them to know? Or they have these DEI seminars about what different races can contribute. Look, the point is the military, and Hicks had said this at one point, he says the military is the least racist part of American society. Why? Because by and large, and I'm generalizing here, it's a combination of poor white guys and poor black guys. And these are guys from the wrong side of the tracks, if you want to put it that way. You got Southern white guys and Midwestern white guys, and then you got black guys from all over the country. And they're thrown together, and they wear the same clothes, they wear uniforms, they answer to the same orders, they take orders from white and black superiors, and they are judged by what they can do, how fast they can run, how well they can swim, how well they can fight. And so Hexet's point is there needs to be a single standard. And this is ultimately, I think, what was at issue in the whole business about women in the military. Is Hexet's point is there needs to be just a single standard. I'm quoting from him now, quote, "The weight of the M240 machine gun does not change. In any place where criteria have been changed to meet racial quotas or gender quotas, that is putting a focus on something other than readiness." So I think we can generalize from all this that really what Trump is doing here is he's bringing in people who are going to apply single standards and excellence across the board. In a way, that's what Pam Bondi was saying. They kept trying to get her to say, will you agree not to go after the January 6th committee? She wouldn't say that. Will you agree that not all the January 6th captives need to be pardoned? She would not say that, because her point is, I'm not making deals with you in advance. I'm not playing the DC game of I'll agree to this if you agree to vote for me. No, I'm going to be applying the law. And that means I'm going to look at these things. If Trump asks me to, I will take up the January 6th cases on a case-by-case basis. Ultimately, what she's really saying is that, hey, if there have been abuses of power, if there have been crimes committed by the January 6th committee, by Liz Cheney, by Merrick Garland, by anyone else, by Jack Smith, we're going to have to take a look at that. So I think this was a very effective way of not getting into the issue of tit for tat. Will you be doing to us what we've been doing to you? Pam Bondi's point is, I am going to be applying the law in a uniform way, and where crimes have been committed, they are going to be prosecuted. Some policy changes on the horizon: increased tariffs on our trade partners, tax cuts, regulation changes. But hey, gold remains a viable diversification tactic. In fact, now more than ever, Birch Gold, the only gold company I endorse, is releasing their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. To get your free copy along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold, text my name Dinesh to the number 989898. Here's the facts. The national debt continues to increase. Our interest payments on the national debt continue to increase. So gold is still your hedge against a weakened dollar. And Birch Gold is still the company I recommend to help you convert an existing IRA of 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. Text Dinesh to 989898. You get a free copy of the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era. There's no obligation here, just information. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. You can trust Birch Gold. Text Dinesh to the number 989898 today.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
I talked a couple of days ago about how Donald Trump is riding higher than ever. And here is a new indication of that. The CEO of Coca-Cola is seen sitting right next to Trump and presenting him with the first ever presidential commemorative inaugural Diet Coke. So Diet Coke is releasing a kind of inaugural edition. And there's Trump, and I'm not sure if he's drinking it. I think he prefers regular Coke, right, honey? I think Trump is a regular Coke. Although we're not, oh, it was a Diet Coke. Yeah, Debbie says it's Starburst and either Coke or Diet Coke. But here's Trump with the bottle of Diet Coke. And it just put through my mind that no mainstream corporate leader like this would be seen with Trump in 2016. Trump was radioactive. And this is a sign of a major vibe shift that has occurred in the country. Now, I also am chuckling over Trump's recent announcement. He says, we're getting a lot of resumes. We're appointing some great people. He says he's hired over 1,000 people for the government, outstanding in every way. He says, but, I'm going to read, in order to save time, money, and effort, it would be helpful if you would not send or recommend to us people who worked with or are endorsed by Americans for No Prosperity, headed by Charles Koch. This is the so-called Americans for Prosperity. Dumb as a Rock John Bolton. Birdbrain Nikki Haley. These are all in quotes. Mike Pence. Disloyal warmongers Dick Cheney and his psycho daughter Liz. Mitt Romney. Paul Ryan. General, ? Mark Milley. James Mattis. Mark Jesper. Or any of the other people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, more commonly known as TDS. Thank you for your attention to this matter. End quote. This is Trump. And this means that this is going to be a MAGA administration through and through. The kind of a very different philosophy than Trump adopted in 2016, and I think came to regret. Now, all of this brings me to what I think Trump is hoping to be his opening achievement, an achievement before he even takes office, namely a ceasefire deal in the Middle East. Think of it. For Trump, you got two wars that have been raging, the war with Israel and Hamas, but more broadly, also at times with Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran. So always the risk of an escalating war in the Middle East. And the other, of course, the war with Russia having invaded Ukraine and the war between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, backed by NATO and the United States. I think Trump's goal is to solve both. And of the two, which one would seem to be harder? Well, the Israel one. Why? Because Israel set a clear goal. We're going to eradicate Hamas. And while Israel has made a lot of progress in doing that, it hasn't in fact done that, which would suggest that this war is going to go on considerably longer. Biden apparently had been trying to get a deal out of Netanyahu and Hamas. And Netanyahu, who I think it's fair to say loads Biden, I think he has not only hostility but contempt for Biden. And the feeling is kind of mutual. So it's no surprise that Biden's interventions have been ineffectual. But what Trump did was he dispatched his new special envoy. His name is Steve Witkoff. And this guy went to Qatar. He went to Jerusalem. He met with Netanyahu. And I think what he communicated is Trump wants this deal done. Now, Netanyahu knows. I don't think Netanyahu is all that happy with the deal. And to some degree, I can see why. Here's the deal. 33 hostages are going to be released. 42-day ceasefire. But there are some 97 to 100 hostages total. About 60 are thought to be alive. So only half of those are coming back. Israel is going to release 30 Palestinian women, children, and elderly imprisoned in exchange for each civilian hostage. And for any female Israeli soldier released, the Jewish state will give up 50 Palestinian prisoners, including 30 apparently facing life sentences. So I think Netanyahu looks at this and he goes, wait, Who's in a position of strength here? I obviously am. Why am I giving up 30 for 1, 50 for 1? In a way, it shows you how little the Palestinians not only view life themselves, but they know that the Israelis value life more. And so they're like, listen, we know that you value life a lot. We don't value life a lot. So a 30 to 1 appears to be a fair trade. Anyway, Netanyahu, I think, has reluctantly agreed to this. I think he does trust Trump. I think he knows that Trump has the welfare of Israel at heart. And that, of course, means a lot. Here's David Friedman, the former ambassador under Trump, I believe. And this is a voice of sanity on all this stuff. And I think he puts it the right way. He goes, look, since October 7, Israel has become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Middle East. And he says Israel has beaten Hamas and Hezbollah, sanitized Syria, humiliated Iran. All true. He says, from this position of undeniable and God-given strength, Israel can afford to overbid for the hostages. Israel's giving up more, but Israel can actually afford it because on the larger military and strategic and political landscape, Israel is now way ahead. And he says, no, it's not a great deal, but it's what winners do when they really want something. I think what he's saying is that, look, it is very important politically, not just for Trump to have a win on this, basically to neutralize one of the two big wars going on, but number two, I think it's even good for Netanyahu. Why? Because the one sore spot, the one area where he's facing continual problems are the hostage families. What are you doing? Why can't you get our family members back? Well, here's a way to do that. Here's a way to achieve that result. And so, viewed from the outside, it seems a deal unfair to Israel, but the truth of it is Israel does get probably most of the living hostages back in one stroke. Now, there's phase 2 and phase 3 of the deal, which I'm not really going to worry about or go into, in part because very often with these deals, you may have phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and whatever. Phase 1 is the only phase that counts because for people who are so far apart, who have so much mutual recriminations and hostility, the idea that they're going to follow this to the letter all the way down the path, I don't really believe it. I don't think anyone does. So we take what we can get in the first step. And again, the Biden has acted like this was his deal. And most of the terms of it, by the way, did come from Biden negotiations. But Biden could not have gotten this deal done. It required Trump to do it.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free.
From all of us here at MyPillow,
thanks, America!
Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Pastor Jack Hibbs, senior pastor at Calvary Chapel in Chino Hills, California. You can follow him on X at Pastor Jack Hibbs. The website, jackhibbs.com. Pastor Hibbs also is the founder and president of Real Life Ministry. He does a nationally syndicated TV program and radio program. Pastor Hibbs, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I just heard you give a sermon in which you were just laying out the problems in California, the situation in California, the danger of having a one-party state. And I want to get to all that, but I think I think as I was listening to you, the thought in my mind was not, the thought in my mind was, I never hear this kind of talk coming from a pulpit. In other words, it's one thing if someone were talking like this, Glenn Beck was doing it out of Dallas, his radio show, or even on a Christian station, but for a pastor to be up there educating your congregation on current issues that are going on in your own state, I don't know why it should feel odd, but it felt odd, and I want you to address directly why you do it.
Awesome. Thank you. First of all, it felt odd to you because, exactly right, we don't do it anymore. When I say we don't do it anymore, Dinesh, I'm a big fan of our colonial pulpits, the pulpits of revolutionary America, which brought our freedoms into existence. If anybody would take the time to read those colonial sermons, it would be like reading what I said last week, where people were given the Word of God, the Bible, to the relevant issues of the day. The church, has gotten so far away from meeting the needs of the people by giving them active truth. We talk about truth, God's true, the Bible's true. Well, if that's true, then there should be a lot of dynamic and action to that, because the Bible then would answer to everything about life. California burns down, and so what I did is I just obeyed the Bible. The Bible says that when the wicked are in power, the people groan. And California is groaning. But it was so magnified, Dinesh, by the melting of Los Angeles and the reservoirs. You already know all this. You've talked about this. The reservoirs, the waters with no fire, hydrants with no water in them, the disorganization, those from DEI put into key positions. Everything that Newsom and that the Democrat Party did in California has now been revealed nakedly to be wrong, and it's deadly. And that's why I spoke up. By the way, it was normal. I mean, if you heard it, you heard the church clapping, because for them it's normal. The church should be the epicenter of truth, even when it hurts.
Why do you think that other pastors are reluctant to do this? I mean, what you say seems so obvious. If Christianity is true, it has a message for your personal life, to be sure, but we also live in families and communities and political society, and it would be very odd to have a Christianity that somehow spoke to your personal life and maybe to your finances and the way you treat your wife, but had nothing to say about how society should be organized, whether policies are good or evil, and whether you should follow them or not. You're taking a kind of holistic or comprehensive approach, but as you know, most people don't. Do you think that that is because a pastor says, I'm afraid of my congregation? Do you think it's because the pastor says, I went to divinity school and I studied the Bible, but I really don't know what's causing these fires, and therefore I have nothing intelligent to say? What do you think is the main reason for this pastoral abstinence?
We'll leave it up to you to answer your own question, because you know. Number one is seminaries are not teaching the full Bible. Many seminaries do not even believe that the Bible, all of the Bible, is true. We live in a woke society regarding seminaries. The other thing is this, Dinesh, is that the fear of man. As long as we have pastors going into the pulpit that fear people instead of God, they're going to try to appease a board member or their salary or the 501c3 status given to them by the IRS. They've got a committee that's looming over them. Or, I hate to say it, but the Bible says it, Book of Revelation says they're simply cowards. They want to be people pleasers. And it's clear at a time like this that we need people to deliver the truth. And so what's amazing about what you just said is the fact that you and I live in a Judeo-Western culture, Christian culture, Judeo-Christian culture. Our laws, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, even the Mayflower Compact, founded upon Judeo-Christian worldview values, meaning this. The Bible, this is going to be a shocker, Dinesh, the Bible is a book on politics. It's got things about kings and about rulers and about governors and about those that are of the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire. And in fact, the Bible tells us Jesus said it this way. When somebody said, hey, whose coin is this? People said, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus took a coin and he said, well, whose coin is this? And it's got Caesar's inscription on it. So they all shouted Caesar. Jesus said, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. In the Western world, Dinesh, nobody understands that rightly. They say, see, separation of church and state. See? Jesus said the opposite. Give Caesar his coin, but render to God the things that are God's. Question Jesus was begging them to answer was, what belongs to God? The answer is everything belongs to God. Even Caesar belongs to God. Caesar's salad belongs to God. It all belongs to God. And so Jesus, every Middle Eastern knew exactly what Jesus meant. We get it over to the West and we break it up. We say, you can do this, but you can't do it over here. I refuse to believe that. I will not Westernize the Bible. It's got to be in its original source and given rightly. And so, look, we talked during COVID. We stayed open because the church, the Bible says, Jesus says, you can't shut the doors of my church. So pastors need to obey the Bible no matter what. And if we wind up getting in trouble, then I'd rather be in trouble obeying God.
Wow. Let's talk about California and these fires. Am I right in believing or understanding that there was not one fire? There were actually multiple fires. And I think that this is quite important because let's think about it. If somehow this was the work of climate change, it would be very odd to say that climate change set 3 independent fires, right? That would be crazy. Climate change just doesn't have that kind of surgical precision. Climate change doesn't have that kind of intentionality to it. So let's start by talking, how do you think these fires got started? The exact cause may not be known, but what do you think happened?
Well, first of all, climate change, it happens 4 times a year. And
Right.
then there is a long-term observation of meteorology, which is the study of the weather and climate, and the Earth goes in cycles. We know this when we chop down a redwood tree that lives 2,000 years old here. It gives you actually the evidence of rainy seasons, dry seasons, hot and cold. That's science. When we say climate change, you and I know that we're talking about and we're giving credence to a construct of a very progressive liberal manipulation ploy to try to manage all kinds of other things. So watch this. If they believe in climate change, then why did Gavin Newsom allow California reservoirs to go dry? Oh, we know the answer. Because one of them had a rip in the rubber coating that went over it, and so it had a rip in the cover. So they drained the entire reservoir that supplies water to Los Angeles in the midst of an emergency because it had a rip. Why not leave the water in the reservoir and fix the rip that goes over the top? Well, we had to do it this way. No, listen, we've been sent, he has been sending water to the Pacific Ocean. Dinesh, the last 2 winters, we've had record-breaking rains and snows. And what did he do with that water? He sent it to the ocean. Bad management, ridiculous infrastructure failure. Every community, we have been fire-prone to areas, Dinesh. It's Southern California, for crying out loud. It's a heavily populated area in a very arid climate. Why not build more reservoirs? Gavin Newsom stopped them, literally. I'm not making it up. He stopped the building of 4 dams that were requested by the Army Corps of Engineers for water control, for fire control. He said no because he listened to the environmentalists. And so it's on their hands. And it's going to change. It's changing right now. I mean, I'm happy to say that there are even Democrats demanding that Karen Bass step down as mayor of Los Angeles, and Gavin Newsom. There's already another recall effort underway to get him out. And a lot of that's being driven by Democrats that still have their brains.
I had a little bit of an exchange on Twitter with the guy who is the owner of the LA Times, Dr. Patrick Soong, I think is his first name. In any event, a smart guy, and he made the following observation. He said, it's not a matter of party or ideology, it is a matter of competence. And clearly, from some of what you're saying, that is an issue. But it seems to me that when you mention the environment, when you mention the diverting of water, that isn't pure incompetence. That is, in fact, ideology. That is, in fact, subscribing to a worldview which says these are our priorities. As you mentioned, DEI. You know, it's more important for us to have a diverse force, and we'll keep some capable white males who want to be firefighters off the force because we're not diverse enough. When we're looking for somebody who matches this set of criteria. So it looks to me to be a weird hybrid of incompetence and ideology. Do you agree?
100%. And by the way, your viewers and maybe those that are tuning in that are not normally listening to what you have to say or what I have to say, they have to agree. The best should be in the right position. Not because of we're gonna fulfill this DEI requirement and have somebody that qualified, they got 5th on the score, but they're going to be put to the front of the line because of DEI. Really? Do you want to have that happen with the next airline flight you take? Do you really want to have that with the next person that's driving your cruise ship? He's not the best captain, but you know what? He's DEI approved. Nobody who lives in a reality, in a real world, will have someone who's 3rd or 4th or 10th best on the list drive their business, drive their Uber. I want the best. And we have just dumbed down America, and now we're reaping this thing where, Dinesh, look, I'm a Christian. I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins, your sins, our sins. He rose again from the dead. That's what the Bible teaches. There's hope in God and all of that. Having said that, God is also the one of excellence. The last time I looked at a tree, it was excellent. The Pacific Ocean is excellent. Everything God does is excellent. And then man comes along and messes everything up because we detached ourselves from God, who is a God of excellence, and we have done all these things that have actually injured ourselves. And now they want us, Dinesh, to celebrate their lunatic views of, well, you know, everything might melt down, but at least we had the first mayor who didn't qualify much for anything, but we've got the first female mayor of Los Angeles. Aren't we cool? No, we're burning down. It didn't work. While she was in Africa, knowing that it's fire season, she went anyway after saying, I will not travel internationally. Then she scurried on over to a flight, and LA paid for her to go to Africa, and she wasn't even here when the fires started. That's DEI. And I believe California has had enough. Just listen to what people are saying. Look at what's going on being said on the streets. People are fed up. I was just in Brentwood on Monday. People are angry. I went to Malibu. I went into Pacific Palisades. We talked to people. They're furious. And so if I can say one more thing, Rick Caruso, maybe you know who he is.
Yeah.
Rick Caruso is a Democrat who loves California. He loves Southern California. The guy has spent billions of dollars developing some of California's most iconic shopping centers. Rick Caruso, Dinesh, went when the fires were raging. He went and ordered a bunch of, it's called Mobile Rain. They're giant water trucks. He had them come in. They watered down his developments of stores, and then he shared the water with the fire department. His entire complex that he paid billions of dollars to build was saved. Guess what happened? We applauded him, and the Democrats in LA, they're angry and they want to crucify him because they said that he used his money and his influence to protect his own development. That's ridiculous. He's being awarded now by the California or by the LA County Fire Department because he did the right thing. If that man did the right thing for his interest, why can't Gavin Newsom do the right thing for our interest? We certainly pay billions of dollars in taxes. We're taxed more than any other state in the nation. Where's our water? Where's our fire? Why are we cutting back on fire fighters? Why are we cutting back on fire engines? Why is LA County closing fire departments? What's with that? Somebody needs to answer this.
I mean, it seems to me that the great importance of what you're doing is that if all the churches in California did what you did, then the people would look and see what their political choices are. And they would say, listen, we got this Caruso guy. He's willing to put in his own money He's not interested in going into politics to get rich or go on foreign junkets. He's competent. And they would make the right choice. So I guess part of what I'm saying is we have an uneducated electorate in California. Yeah. The reason you have a one-party state is the voters of California have voted for a one-party state. And the reason they voted for a one-party state, in my opinion, is there were not enough people laying out for, because, you know, the ordinary guy is out there, he's doing his daily job, whether he's an accountant or whether he's a plumber. And so leaders need to come forward and spell out, here's what's going on around you. Here's why your dollar is losing value. Here's why there are fires, and there have been fires for a long time, but here's why this fire was so lethal, is because it was greatly mismanaged by people who don't have your interests and who have the wrong set of priorities. Isn't that what needs to happen?
Absolutely. And listen, I publicly called out, I put him on the spot. I don't know Rick Caruso. I've never met him. But in that Sunday message, I actually looked at the camera and I said, Rick Caruso, if you're watching this right now, or if this gets to you, I'm asking, we are asking. And listen, about 9,000, 10,000 people by the end of the day, we said to him, after all the services on a Sunday, collectively, we said, Rick Caruso, will you please run for mayor of Los Angeles? And then we also put a shout out that we're hoping that a guy by the name of Steve Hilton runs for governor of California. He would be great. He lives up in the Bay Area, but he's one of the few conservatives. He's got the right answers in the direction we need to go regarding water and regarding our economy and regarding citizens taking back their state. My goodness, this is a state that we're spoiled. Dinesh, listen, you know this state. We've got everything. We can do anything, everything. It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. It's worth fighting for. I don't want to move somewhere else. But the price of gas, the price of homes, the amount of taxes, 51% of our income is going to the government here. It's not the California Republic. It's actually a democracy led by a one-party rule, and the republic is gone. However, we can turn it around because, Dinesh, I'll leave you with this. Nancy Pelosi got fired, and then Kevin McCarthy was in, and then Mike Johnson's in. How did that ever happen? Because in that election cycle, California sent more Republican congressmen and women to D.C., and it resulted in Nancy Pelosi getting fired. What does it mean? California's turning around. And this fire, I'm not going to apologize for what I'm going to say. The Democrats are saying you shouldn't politicize the fire. Are you kidding me? It's the politics that got the fire going. It's the politics that robbed us of our water. It's the politics that robbed us of our money being spent to the right infrastructures. So no, too late for that. It's time to point fingers. It's bad politics that led to bad leadership that led to losing homes and life. And we're not going to take it anymore. California's done with that.
Guys, I've been talking to an exemplary pastor, Pastor Jack Hibbs, senior pastor at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Follow him on X at Pastor Jack Hibbs, the website, jackhibbs.com. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Continuing in my discussion of the big lie, I want to make the argument that the Democrats invented political racism. Now, this will seem like an extravagant claim. Surely racism preceded the Democratic Party. Yes, it did. But the point I want to make is that political racism emerged in America as a rationalization, as an attempt to defend the institution of slavery. And the Democratic Party is the one that concocted this political racism. Let's go back to the American founding. The American founding involved a compromise with slavery. But it was not a compromise in principle. It was a compromise in practice. And so the principle was, in fact, anti-slavery. All men are created equal. That was the principle. But of course, that principle would suggest that blacks should not be enslaved. And therefore, how do you reconcile a principle like that with compromising with slavery? Well, Lincoln did it. He said, look, the founders temporarily permitted slavery because there was no other way to get a union. And nevertheless, Lincoln said over time, the principle needs to be realized, and that means that when slavery can be gotten rid of and blacks, like everybody else, can be extended full rights, that needs to happen. In other words, we need to approximate the practice to the principle over time. Now, the Democrats didn't want any of this because, in fact, plantation slavery spread far more in the 19th century than it did in the 18th. Part of this was the reason was the invention of the cotton gin, which made slavery highly profitable in large parts of the South. And so the Democratic Party became the defender of this institution. And so how do you get out of this kind of chain of logic, which is that all men are created equal, blacks are men, therefore blacks should not be enslaved? Well, the Democrats basically figured out that the only way to get out of that is to say all men are created equal, blacks are not men. So by denying the full humanity of blacks, of the Negro, as it was then called, you could then say that it's perfectly okay not to enslave people in general, but to enslave these people. Why? Because they're not really people. So I want to argue that the existing practice of plantation slavery created an opening for a new political type of racism which came to define the Democratic Party. Now, even after slavery ended, you might think, well, all right, good. Well, this racism is now going to go away. But it didn't. In fact, in the view of many observers, it became worse. Now, why did it become worse? The Democratic Party, as it turns out, took this concept of a political racism, or to put it differently, racism that provided a political benefit to the Democratic Party, and they adapted it to their new situation. So their new situation was post-slavery, but the Democrats said, we can now use racism kind of in a new way. And what is that way? To unify the whites of the South and to elevate them by making them all superior to the Negro, to blacks. So in other words, we will use racism to promote a kind of social equality among whites. And by the way, the kind of foundation for this was already there. Because if you think back to the Civil War, what was the percentage of Southern whites that fought in the war who owned slaves? Answer, very few. It was a very small percentage. Most of the Southern whites didn't have slaves, and yet they fought on the Southern side. And the question is, how do you get people, let's just say that slavery was not the only, but the primary cause of the war. How do you convince Southern guys who don't have slaves, who are dirt poor, who are in some cases working alongside the slaves? How do you convince them to go fight on your side? Well, there was a Southern planter, a Democrat, John Townsend. In 1860, he gave a speech to something called the 1860 Association. And he addressed the question of how a plantation system benefits whites who don't own slaves. Very interesting. Here's what he said. Quote, "The color of the white man is now in the South a title of nobility in his relations with the Negro." He says, while an individual black man, quote, "may be immensely superior in wealth." And you might think, wait a minute, there were blacks who were richer than whites in the South? Yes, there were. There were free blacks, and some of them were millionaires, and some of them owned slaves themselves, black slaves. I discuss all this in my book, The End of Racism. I give you the data, I give you the number of slaves, and so on. But to continue with John Townsend, while an individual black man may be immensely superior in wealth, yet the poorest non-slave owner, being a white man, is superior in the eyes of the law, may serve and command in the militia, may sit upon juries, to decide upon the rights of the wealthiest in the land, may give his testimony in court, may cast his vote equally with the largest slaveholder in the choice of his rulers. This is a very interesting statement, because what he's really saying is we are creating a system in which rich whites and poor whites are on the same plane when it comes to political rights. But we're denying those rights to blacks. However successful, however well-educated, however rich, it doesn't matter. So what the Democratic slave owner is offering the poor white guy is what the Democratic Party offers the white Southern voter after the Civil War, namely the chance to belong to an aristocracy of color. So by drawing a sharp line between white and black, placing every white guy above the line, every black below the line, the Democrats are saying that, basically they're saying that the poorest, laziest, stupidest white man is still above the richest, most industrious, and most intelligent black man. And so we come to an interesting pass, which is that I had made the case that anti-Semitism offers a psychological benefit to the anti-Semites. And now we see that racism offers the exact same benefit to poor whites. And this is the way in which the parallel or the analogy between the Nazis and the fascists on that side of the pond and the Democrats on this side becomes believable. It's not just a general analogy, it's a very specific analogy. And now I'm going to turn, and I'll pick this topic up next week, to the parallel of racial terrorism. I'm talking about the parallel between the Ku Klux Klan, which is a product of the Democratic Party here in America, and the Nazi brown shirts. Remember, Hitler had a paramilitary group called the brown shirts. And again, I'm not simply going to say, well, there's a paramilitary group over there, there's a paramilitary group over here. No, I'm going to show that this parallel is a very close one. Number one, the Klan and the brown shirts target the same types of people. First of all, it's worth noting that these paramilitary groups don't just target, quote, minorities. Yes, in the case of the brown shirts, the Jews, in the case of the Klan, the blacks. But they both target political opponents. The early Klan killed just as many whites as blacks. But who were the whites? Whites who didn't go along, whites who were sympathetic to the Republican Party. These were the people who were targeted. And similarly, this was also the case with the brown shirts. They targeted political opponents of the Nazi Party. Americans who visited Germany in the 1930s often remarked on the similarity between the KKK and the brown shirts. Here's a line from one of the Nazi newspapers. It's called the News Volk. It comes from the National Socialist Office on Racial Policy. It's defending lynching. Remember, lynching was going on in the American South, often sponsored by the local Democratic Party. And here's the quote: "What is lynch justice if not the natural resistance of the Volk," Volk here meaning people, "to an alien race that is attempting to gain the upper hand?" Notice how Democrats, Southern whites, often talked about the uppity Negroes. So just as the lynching was used to take these uppity Negroes like down a notch, teach them a lesson, so too the Nazis used racial terrorism as a way to target the uppity Jew and bring him, if you will, to heel.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.